next on the news.
In this great country, weapons designed for battlefields should not be used to execute people shopping for groceries.
The governor of New York proposing to strengthen gun control laws in the wake of that mass shooting in Buffalo. Also, bishops in New Jersey outraged over a state mandate to require health insurance to cover abortions. And the White House announces another round of free in-home COVID tests. We'll tell you how you can get them. Plus,
all 10 years that we've had him, he's like, I'm trying to get out of there.
A turtle makes a slow return home. Wait until you hear how many months he was missing. Currents News starts right now. I'm Christine Persichetti. One question many have after the racially motivated supermarket rampage is, how did the suspect get a hold of the gun? The alleged gunman was known to police for making threats of violence at his school. He also allegedly made threats online. So now Governor Kathy Hochul is proposing a slew of new state laws, and for her, it's personal.
The past few days have been among the most difficult in my life.
Just days after 10 people were killed in a supermarket shooting rampage in her hometown of Buffalo, New York Governor Kathy Hochul's aim is on closing loopholes in the state's gun laws.
This is the United States of America. It's not a battlefield. It shouldn't be a battlefield. And in this great country, weapons designed for battlefields should not be used to execute people shopping for groceries or a birthday cake.
The governor says the alleged shooter used an assault rifle he purchased legally in New York State. Now she wants to expand the state's definition of firearms to include more types of guns, like this one.
Our laws don't regulate this. They will now.
Another proposed bill would require micro-stamping the bullets of semi-automatic guns made or sold in New York to help police better investigate gun crimes. Hochul signed an executive order strengthening the state's red flag law that would require state police to take weapons away from potentially dangerous people. She's also directing the state attorney general to investigate social media platforms. The supermarket gunman live streamed the shooting on Twitch.
There's a feeding frenzy going on in social media that hate just breeds more hate.
And Hochul is asking for more federal help to prevent guns from getting into New York, with so many being used in crimes. Illegal guns are keeping the NYPD busy. The department says it made 372 arrests in April of 2022. That's compared to 226 arrests during the same time last year, a 65% increase.
Communities are in mourning, and I hope to God that this is the wake-up call that this country has needed.
According to the nonprofit New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, the state already has some of America's strictest gun control laws, and one of New York's toughest gun laws, which sharply limits the carrying of weapons outside the home, is even being challenged in the Supreme Court, with a decision expected soon. A new report from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms finds that gun production here in the U.S. has tripled since 2000. The new data also found that production has spiked sharply over the last 3 years. And most troubling, police recovered more than 19,000 ghost guns in 2021. That's a tenfold increase since 2016. The House will vote on a bill aimed at preventing domestic terrorism in the wake of the attack in Buffalo. The measure would also combat the threat of violent extremism by white supremacists. The Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act would set up offices at the Department of Homeland Security specifically focused on domestic terrorism. Lawmakers are again under pressure to take action after last weekend's shooting. Former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio may be heading to D.C. De Blasio announcing he is exploring a run for New York's 10th congressional district seat on Wednesday. He previously considered running for New York's 11th district, but de Blasio dropped his bid in February before it started. According to a new draft plan, among the neighborhoods de Blasio would represent if he wins include parts of Brooklyn's Dumbo, Borough Park, and Park Slope. Bishops in New Jersey are mad over a proposed mandate that would require health insurance plans to fully cover abortions. It would also dedicate more taxpayer funds to abortions and codify regulations allowing non-physicians to perform the procedure. Bishops in the state say they're disappointed and outraged over the announcement, writing in a statement, "This proposed legislation is a direct attack on the dignity and sanctity of life and is further evidence that we have failed as a society when a mother feels her only option is to end the life of her child." Bishops in New York are sending a message of support to pregnant mothers, and you can read all about it in this week's tablet newspaper. The statement, titled "Toward a Pro-Life Future in the Empire State," assesses the current pro-life situation in New York and envisions a path forward for what is widely considered the abortion capital of the world. That vision is presented through a list of 12 aspiration statements by the bishops. The paper lists all of them for you, as well as the pregnancy centers here in New York meant to help new mothers choose life. Again, you can find all of that in this week's paper. Just head to your local church to pick up a copy. If you want to get future editions delivered right to your mailbox, just go to thetablet.org and subscribe. Capitol Hill has teed up 3 high-profile funding bills this week. Federal lawmakers are expected to debate over aid for Ukraine, the baby formula shortage, and assistance for small businesses. Amy Kiley takes a look at the 3 measures.
3 high-profile spending bills are moving through Congress this week. They'd provide funding to help Ukraine, to address the baby formula shortage, and to support small businesses still recovering from the pandemic. The Senate is expected to pass a Ukraine aid package Thursday.
Strong bipartisan support for this funding in the House and in the Senate, but also assurance that we have effective oversight of our assistance to Ukraine.
That bipartisan support might be harder to find for 2 other funding bills Congress is considering.
Now, these same big spenders are proposing another $50 billion next week to bail out restaurants. Restaurants that have been primarily injured by overzealous Democrat governors and their edicts.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is fast-tracking a bill to help restaurants, bars, and other businesses still struggling due to the pandemic. It's unlikely to get the 60 votes needed to pass. Some Republicans support it, but Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says he probably won't. Over in the House,
mothers across the country are looking to us for help, and we will not force them to face this crisis on their own.
Democrats want $28 million to try to ease the baby formula shortage. Most of it would pay for more FDA workers to inspect production facilities. Republican Senator John Cornyn has said he thinks focusing on the supply chain could be more effective. I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
The short supply of baby formula has gotten so dangerous that healthcare workers are now calling it a national crisis. In Tennessee, at least 2 children have been hospitalized as a result of the shortage. Their doctor says they require a special kind of formula because of their intestinal disorders. But since none is available, the 2 children have to be treated with IV fluids and nutrients. Amid this shortage, the Biden administration is standing by its decision to supply formula to migrant families detained at the border.
It is the law, but we believe that when children and babies, or babies I should say, are crossing the border with a family member, that providing them formula is morally right.
The now former White House press secretary Jen Psaki also pointed out that the actions are in line with the 1997 agreement requiring the federal government to provide proper care to immigrant children in government custody. A shocking find in the investigation into the crash of a China Eastern plane back in March. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that black box data suggests the Boeing 737 was intentionally crashed. The plane nosedived 29,000 feet into the mountains in China, killing all 132 passengers and crew on board. It was China's deadliest air disaster in decades. Cardinal Joseph Zen may already have a court date in place. A published report citing sources close to the former Archbishop of Hong Kong says he is set to appear in court on May 24th, and he could be further detained if some charges be laid. Cardinal Zen was arrested May 11th for allegedly colluding with foreign forces. The 90-year-old cardinal has long been a public supporter of pro-democracy and independence protests in Hong Kong. He had been released on bail later that day. This as the Vatican's foreign minister has begun his 3-day visit to Ukraine. Archbishop Paul Gallagher starting his trip in Lviv, where he was welcomed by the Latin Rite Metropolitan Archbishop there and the Ukrainian ambassador to the Holy See. He even went to the Archbishop's residence, where he prayed for the people of Lviv and Ukraine. Later, the English prelate visited some refugee centers. Thursday, he's set to meet with the president of Lviv, and on Friday, he's expected to go to the country's capital, Kyiv, and visit more sites nearby. Finland and Sweden each formally applied to join the NATO alliance on Wednesday. The two nations have a long history of neutrality, but Russia's aggression led them to shift their views. The application process could take several months, but NATO's Secretary General says this is an important step in each nation's security. Nina Dos Santos has more from Stockholm.
For Anna Ladigina, who's just escaped the war in Ukraine with her mother and young baby, Stockholm means safety for now.
Here, it's so calm that people who are living here, hundreds really kilometers from this war, and you don't feel it right here. It's difficult to understand the situation until you're not in it.
Sweden has for years offered sanctuary to people like Anna fleeing conflicts across the world, unimpeded thanks to the nation's once cherished neutrality. But now that is about to change as the country prepares to join NATO alongside neighbouring Finland.
Every country has their own right to make their decisions, and we think this is better for the future to be a member in NATO for the security of Sweden and the Swedish people.
Sweden and Finland have changed their minds on NATO at lightning speed, but this isn't a decision that either side is taking lightly. For these Nordic neighbours, joining NATO means turning their backs on a deliberate policy of military non-alignment that has served them well for many generations. For NATO, it also means a much longer border with Russia to police. Public support for NATO membership was overwhelmingly high in Finland, but here in Sweden, the debate is more nuanced.
A very different history.
Anton Hamburg, an economics student in his 20s, says the decision has been rushed.
I don't think people should be scared that Russia is going to invade Sweden. I think that's preposterous. They're not going to invade Sweden.
Amid fears the Ukraine invasion could spark a bigger conflict, we meet Rainer Piernau, who fled his native Germany after the Second World War, first for neutral Austria before settling in Sweden 60 years ago.
Now it comes back all the memories, so and what could happen for those people.
So how do you feel about Sweden's move now to join NATO?
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, because nobody knows what will happen in the next 20 years. That is my concern.
Nina Dos Santos in Stockholm.
There's a lot more news headed your way. It was an oasis in the middle of a food desert, how the top supermarket served as a vital hub for the Buffalo community. And the U.S. marks a grim milestone while the White House is sending out another round of free at-home COVID tests. Plus, he's a rebellious reptile with a knack for running away. The shell-shocking reunion that's been more than 200 days in the making.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
The horrifying supermarket rampage in Buffalo has left a neighborhood without its grocery store. It's a location that had become a community necessity. Omar Jimenez reports on the food desert in the area.
Food drives are now temporarily lifelines for residents in this East Buffalo neighborhood after a massacre at their only area supermarket left not just pain, but a hole in the heart of a community.
I would have to drive 10 to 15 minutes away. Now, maybe more than that.
There's now nowhere nearby to get fresh produce for residents.
Some broccoli, fresh broccoli.
Like Lucretia Barton and her 4-year-old daughter.
I gotta travel other places. That's not even in my route to go get food. The other stores, you getting junk food, and it's not good for you or your kids, your families, eating junk.
The top supermarket opened back in 2003.
I was actually born over here. It was a big win, we felt like, for a place where you don't really get many wins.
While Tops has pledged to reopen and is providing shuttle service to another location, it's unclear when it'll ever come back in this neighborhood. Life without it is a new, sudden reality.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Very upsetting. I mean, you can ask anybody who lives over here, to lose a staple in your community like that, you almost don't get over it. And to have someone come from outside and not like you for the simplest thing is the things you were born with, like we can't change that.
This community does what this community always does, shows love. This community has not failed to demonstrate that same love and that same ethic. When one person hurts, we all hurt.
Paul Thomas is the pastor at Bethel AME Church, just a few blocks from the supermarket.
Access to the nearest produce-bearing or protein-bearing market is about 2 miles away.
There are other places to get food near the Tops, but usually without the resources of fresh produce.
You have corner stores, you have Family Dollars, so the gaps with being able to access those resources is an issue.
Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
A Tops Market spokesperson says it's working with local leaders to provide free food to the community. To the coronavirus crisis in the U.S. now. Johns Hopkins University reported Tuesday more than 1 million people in the nation have died of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. About 3/4 of all COVID deaths have been among seniors, according to the CDC. And while racial and ethnic disparities have lessened over the course of the pandemic, the risk of dying from COVID has been 2 times higher for blacks, Hispanics, and American Indians compared to whites. Meanwhile, the White House says a 3rd round of free at-home COVID tests are now available. You can order an additional 8 tests online, bringing the total number of free tests allowed per household to 16. The move is part of a pledge made by Biden in January of 2022 to make 1 billion tests available to the public. Since then, more than 70 million households have ordered. You can order those tests at covid.gov/tests. Just a note, those 8 tests will come in 2 separate packages with 4 inside, each with its own tracking number. Shipping on the tests is also free. On top of the free tests you can order online, the FDA has authorized a new first-of-its-kind over-the-counter COVID test that can not only detect the coronavirus, but other common respiratory illnesses. Mandy Gaither tells us more.
Across the U.S., new COVID-19 cases have more than doubled over the past month. The Northeast hit especially hard. More than 40% of people there live in a county with a high community level. That means universal indoor masking is recommended.
We still have a lot to do with regard to vaccinations, with regard to boosters, with regard to making it very clear that we have antivirals that are available for people, particularly those who are at high risk.
Testing, another weapon in the war on COVID-19. The FDA has now cleared a new over-the-counter test unlike any other. Using a nasal swab sample, it can test for COVID, flu, and RSV at the same time. Those samples are then sent back to the test maker for testing. Results are delivered through an online portal. The test can be purchased online or in a store without a prescription. Meanwhile, the American Academy of Pediatrics reports new COVID-19 cases among U.S. kids is up for the 5th week in a row. On Tuesday, the FDA gave emergency use authorization for a booster dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for children 5 to 11 at least 5 months after their initial series of shots. The company says a 3rd vaccine dose raised Omicron-fighting antibodies by 36 times in this age group. I'm Mandy Gaither.
If you don't trust the at-home tests to give you an accurate result, a study out of Finland says man's best friend can now sniff out COVID. Using skin swab samples, researchers trained 4 dogs to detect COVID-19 infections. The pooches correctly identified 92% of positive samples and 91% of negative samples. Then they moved on to sniffing hundreds of airport passengers, where they correctly identified 98.7% of negative samples. They missed 3 positive cases, but there weren't enough positive samples to get an accurate percentage. Speaking of dogs, we got some amazing pet news coming your way. First, meet Grace. She had a rough start, but now she's getting a second chance at life. Plus, ever hear of the joke, "My turtle ran away"? Well, Tiny Tim here actually did it. Hear about his harrowing escape and the twist of fate that brought him back home more than 6 months later. A dog in southern Florida found severely malnourished in horrible conditions now has a second chance at life.
Life is good. It's not as bad as you might have thought.
Just 2 weeks ago, police found 12-year-old Blanca tied to a short chain, riddled with fleas, and starved to the point of eating rocks. But now she has a new home, a new family, and a new name that fits her perfectly: Grace.
She exemplifies grace because she went through such a terrible time and yet is so sweet. I cry all the time, but then I think it's so rewarding. I have to do this. She deserves a loving third act for however long it is, we don't know.
Sarah Whitten Grigsby runs a small foster hospice foundation called One More Day. And when no one would take in Grace, she put it upon herself to rescue the dog. Finally, we've all heard stories of beloved pets running away, but for one family in Ohio, run might not be the right word to use. Jordan Vandenberg tells us about the runaway reptile who was gone for more than half a year before returning home.
Meet Tiny Tim. If nothing else, know this: he has places to go and things to see. He's not yet a teenager, but a rebellious reptile.
He's a little traveler. He loves going everywhere.
All the same.
There's always somewhere else he's got to be.
Vanessa Baker met Tiny Tim on her 4th birthday, and together they've celebrated every birthday since.
Well, now he's the size of my 15-year-old hand, so.
It didn't take Tiny Tim long to become a member of the family.
Most people that know me know I have a tortoise.
Despite doing everything he could to run, walk, away from them.
All 10 years that we've had him, he's like, I'm trying to get out of there.
One day last fall, after years of planning and plotting, Tiny Tim made his move.
Who loses a turtle?
There was a pint-sized hole in his outdoor enclosure. This was his moment. This was his shell shank.
With a lost dog, there's kind of a protocol with that. With a lost tortoise, it's all about who lives near us.
The family posted to Facebook and posted his mugshot on flyers.
This was out all over the neighborhood.
Weeks went by, then months. Winter came, winter left, and Tiny Tim was 3 shells to the wind.
Didn't hear anybody seeing him or anything, so it's kind of lost hope for sure.
We didn't think we'd find him, really, because it was winter and snow and everything.
Snow eventually gave way to spring, and 223 days after his great escape, the 4-legged fugitive passed by the home of Clayton Johnson.
He was moving pretty fast for a tortoise.
Clayton isn't just any 12-year-old. The future herpetologist,
I'm a reptile enthusiast,
knew without a doubt that Tiny Tim belonged to someone. The Bakers were shell-shocked.
Right when he posted it, within 5 minutes, several people are calling us.
Somehow he made it across there, and then he ended up by the school over there.
In 7 months, Tiny Tim made it about a mile, played Frogger in traffic, and was looking for love in all the wrong places.
It was just really heartwarming. I've never really had an experience like this, so it was really nice to get him back to where it belongs.
The Bakers are beyond grateful for Clayton's keen eye, and now know they can't let Tiny Tim out of their sights again.
And he'll try to scratch your hands.
Russian tortoises can live up to 50 years, giving Tiny Tim plenty of time to try again.
He's always going places.
What a great story. They got laughed out loud 3 times. That was Jordan Vandenberg reporting. The Bakers say Tiny Tim was unscathed and healthy when he came back, and they were able to identify him thanks to a distinct scar on his shell. And that is Current News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.